Hello and welcome back, and that's right, today we're going to talk about the very best 6-bay NASs of the year. If you are watching this video somewhere in 2023, good for you. I hope the year's going well, fingers crossed for you. But this video is about the very best 6-bay desktop NAS devices available to buy at the end of 2022, and almost certainly going to be the best of the best for at least the next 5 to 6 months. So if you're watching this after summer 2023, there might be something else out there. But these are devices that for one reason or another, they've all won for their categories, are the very best 6-bays for your needs, be you a home or business user. But before we go any further, I think it is worth highlighting what exactly makes a 6-bay NAS. Indeed, why is a 6-bay even a thing now? I remember not so long ago when 2 and 4-bay were, good for your home or your small business, and all of a sudden you went up to 8, your rack mount, your 12-bay, your big stuff. And somehow in the last few years, this wonderful little zone has opened up here in the middle where 6-bay NAS devices, like that one above me, more on that one later, have entered the scene. Now, about a week ago at the time of recording, I was at a Synology event, meeting and greeting a few people there, seeing what Synology have got in store for 2023 and stuff, and I met a chap called John Spiteri. Hello, if you're watching this, John. And we had a very, very small conversation about 6-bays, and probably one of the most defining characteristics of a 6-bay and why it makes it popular, and arguably why 6-bays have become more and more popular in the last 4 or 5 years. And it comes down to one thing: RAID 6. The importance of our data these days is so fantastically paramount, not only for business but for home use as well, that traditional RAIDs like RAID 5 or just RAID 1 or just generally one safety net RAID systems where you can afford to lose one drive are just not cutting it. And as hard drives have got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, we've got to a point where a RAID 6, which has a 2 drive penalty in terms of capacity but has a 2-disk safety net in redundancy, is actually a lot more palatable, because the hard drives have got so big now that even having 2, 3, 4 hard drives at these larger capacities isn't so bad. Yes, we're paying more for our average terabyte, but at the same time, it allows us to have a 2-drive safety net and not be too penalised in the overall capacity. And that's the big takeaway about this video. The 4 6-bays I'm going to talk about today are the best in their own way. And when we go through them one by one, it is worth highlighting that although they all are kind of winners in their own way, which we'll go through later on, they all provide the same level of storage by default. They all provide that wonderful balancing point there between overall capacity and availability of different redundancy and backup options outside of RAID and more. Indeed, all of the solutions I talk about today will provide the following. Number one, they all provide a multi-tiered backup solution for your 3-2-1 backups, as well as synchronizing with cloud, simultaneously with NAS to NAS and USB backups as well. They also provide those internal redundancy and rollback retention policy-based backups, such as ranging from RAID to things like snapshots there as well, and synchronization with other servers, again, via rsync on the network and that remote stuff as well. Indeed, they can all be accessed remotely as well as via the network, with all of them providing kind of bouncing server level access with their respective brand servers and their own first place, things like quick connect and easy access and stuff like that. On top of that, there's multimedia applications for photos, videos, music, both first and third party, supported throughout, as well as virtual machine applications and surveillance tools as well that allow you to connect to multiple IP cameras with a different layered number of cameras supported and available, and all of it accessible via a desktop interface, via a mobile phone and other applications as well, with a little element of KVM thrown in there as well. Now, if you're running a Mac setup, you're running a Windows setup, you're running an Android setup, you're running a Linux setup, Ubuntu and such, all of these devices support those platforms. So don't worry, whichever one of those you're living on for the majority of your client devices, all of today's devices support those, as well as supporting a myriad of different software applications via the third party, either as iSCSI targets and map drives, or integrated with their own onboard apps for things like Amazon Fire TV and Android TV as well. And they all arrive with 3 years of manufacturer's warranty that can be expanded in some cases. But that's it. Those are what all of these can do. But let's talk a little bit differently. Let's talk about the best all-round 6-bay you can buy right now at the end of 2022 and for 2023, the TS664. Now, the TS664 is one of those systems that for some reason everybody knows is a great 6-bay, but for some reason, some of the bigger, more established NAS brands out there will refuse to make a 6-bay of this architecture. It is, the TS664 arrives with an Intel Celeron processor inside, when generally a lot of 6-bays are when we start to see less of the integrated graphics CPUs. It also arrives by default with 8 gig of DDR4 memory that can be scaled up to 16 gig there. Now, on top of that, this system, along with its 6 bays of SATA storage that support up to the very latest 22 TB drives, also has 2 M2 NVMe slots inside that allow you to use PCIe Gen 3 SSDs inside, either for caching, for tiered storage with Q-tier and QNAP, and of course as traditional standalone storage pools, and even run the system OS from them there. The system has a KVM setup, so it has an HDMI output that's 4K 60 frames per second, and the USB ports on board are USB 3.2 Gen 2, so 10 gigabits per second. Those USBs can be used for expanded storage, they can be used for enhanced peripherals for network connections. You can add 2.5 GBE and 5 GBE ports to this device. Indeed, the default network ports of this device, there's 2 of them on there, and they're 2.5G each, when the system arrives at the same price point as everyone else, rolling out 1G. Indeed, it even has a PCIe Gen 3x2 upgrade slot that allows you to add more M2 NVMe slots, adding 1 or 2 port 10G cards, or combo cards that allow you to have both inside this device. And on top of that, the system can be expanded by 2-bay, 4-bay, 8-bay or 12-bay expansion devices, depending on how they're configured and if you're going to use the SAS upgrade card there. So again, huge amount of hardware potential and ability built into this device. But then you've got the software from QNAP, which is QTS. Now, this does not arrive with support of utilizing with the ZFS QUTS platform, but in the EXT4 version here, you have got all of the myriad of applications. You've got the graphical user interface, you've got the surveillance app with 8 camera licenses in QVR Pro, great multimedia support and AI support, either when you're utilizing QMaggie with its AI photo recognition for face, people, thing recognition and more, or PhotoStation for those of you of a more professional mind that want a little bit more configuration in your sharing. On top of that, multimedia console allows you to micromanage all of the multimedia handling, indexing, transcoding and more from a single interface there. You've also got support of Video Station, which has transcoding and library creation and stuff like that. You have got music handling there, which might be a little bit better, but there is support of third-party tools for that as well. Probably one of the best multi-tier backup applications you can find in Hybrid Backup Sync 3, as well as support of SAAS and PAAS services, thanks to BoxSafe there as well. Use Hybrid Mount to bolt on cloud storage that you may have and make it have the appearance of localized storage, and therefore integrating the QTS app or with it. Or alternatively, you can go full virtualization and start utilizing Virtualization Station for QNAP, which allows you to deploy multiple VMs, all of which can be downloaded from within the app client. Windows VMs, Ubuntu VMs, other third-party management network tool VMs, and the Container Station application, and the Linux Station application, all of which can be used to download pre-created virtual environments. All of that included within this 6-bay. That's why it's the best all-round 6-bay for me. It's got a little bit of everything. It might not be the most powerful 6-bay in the market, but what it does counter that with is the ability to do pretty much everything to a number of different degrees. Ultimately, for me, hands down winner. And even then, it's actually not too badly priced either, seeing a discount since its original release back in March, April of 2022. But what if you're less about the hardware? What if you're more about the software more than anything? Is there a better choice? Well, for that, maybe an oldie but a goodie, but we've got to talk about this one, the Synology DS1621 Plus. Now, the DS1621 Plus is a little bit more business, I'll be straight with you. This one, although it doesn't have that integrated graphics CPU inside, makes up for it with being a lot more about file transit. The big standout for it, of course, is the software, hence why it wins the best software 6-bay. But before we get to that, let's talk a little bit about that hardware there. So, the hardware inside this, it arrives with a quad-core embedded Ryzen there, and that is the V1500B. be. This arrived in the later stages of 2020, so there may be a refresh of this in 2023 or even 2024, so do bear that in mind. But that CPU, quad core at 2.2 gigahertz there, it's a 4-core, 8-thread processor, also arrives with 2 gig of DDR4 memory that can be upgraded to 32 gig, and that's ECC, error correcting code memory, which means as data passes through the memory during write operations, a little blueprint of it, a little parity there is put together of that data as it passes through, and then it's compared at the end of the pass through the memory, and then if there are any inconsistencies for the avoidance of bit rot and stuff like that, it then does a reparation and just repairs the file at the bit level right the way back to where it should be, and therefore allows those long cold or warm storage caches of data to remain as consistent as ever. The system also has 2 M2 NVMe slots inside, but at the time of recording they can only be used for caching. They can't be used for storage pools, unlike systems like the DS93 Plus. In terms of network connectivity, the system arrives with 4 1GBE ports there, so 1GBE, but there are 4 of them, so you can lack them. There are USB ports, but they're older gen. And they can only really be used for storage in a very small number of peripherals. So in terms of hardware, it does sound like I'm giving it a bit of a rough time. On the good side, there is a couple of means to add 2 5-bay expansions and add another 10 bays of storage to the device. And there's even an upgrade slot there, a PCIe Gen 3x8 slot that allows you to add single and 2 port 10 GBE upgrades, as well as individual cards that have got combo abilities on them, that have got M2 slots and 10 GBE, but bear in mind the combo card on this will only allow you to use that 10 G slot, and there are support of greater than 10 GBE. There's some fiber cards there, the 25 GBE card there, as well as some Intel third-party card support as well. So a couple of questions. One, why am I choosing this one and not the DS1621XS? I know a number of you are wondering, why didn't I go for the Xeon-powered 10 GBE 6-bay they released a few months close to this? Well, a couple of reasons. One, that device is between £1,600 and £1,800 at the moment, and it's very expensive for a 6-bay NAS. And given how we've seen some of the Synology portfolio and their XS series go, you might be better off, rather than going for the 1621XS, to go for that 3622 that has 2 10G ports on board already and a better CPU. So when it comes to 6-bay, I feel like the 1621XS has not aged as well as the 1621 Plus here. But let's get back to the category at hand, how this wins the software. And unsurprisingly, the reason it wins the software battle is because of DSM 7.1 and 7.2, which may be launching in beta or full at the time you're watching this video. DSM 7 is still, hands down, the go-to software for NAS. When you buy a Synology NAS, the bulk of the money you're paying is going towards that software. Notwithstanding, it's the fastest, most responsive, and the most user-friendly of the platforms out there. The client tools that are available for Windows, Mac, even your Android clients, from the comfort of your sofa, it's just better on the Synology platform. Hell, Synology is the only platform that has an Alexa application to enjoy the media on your NAS from the comfort of your sofa via voice command without using a third-party tool like My Media. On top of that, it is consistently the better platform than anyone else in terms of the tools available. If you are going to use the NAS with a bunch of third-party tools that you've got knocking around in your home or office, there's a reasonable chance that somewhere in the Synology DSM catalogue of apps, there is their own first-party app that will do things a lot more efficiently and a lot more securely than bouncing it between different apps. From the collaboration suite with its own Office application that covers, docs, PDFs, XLS, PPTX documents. On top of that, you've got chat, you've got email clients on there as well. Then you've got their own virtual machine tool that can actually work simpatico with things like VMware and Hyper-V to turn virtual VMs into physical bare metal VMs on premise. On top of that, you've got Active Backup Suite, which is the standard Active Backup client that allows you to basically image backup whole virtual or physical PC systems and also other third-party clients. On top of that, it also integrates with cloud VMs as well, all of which were a single management interface there, visible and controllable with schedules and retention and restoration control, all from that single interface there. On top of that, you have those dedicated versions for those VMs ones that support all of the kind of native data UI of Office 365 and Google Workspace to allow you to create a localized sync with those third-party PaaS and SaaS systems with the NAS. So if you do have a severed internet connection and you're using those Google or Microsoft services, it allows you to not have to worry about losing access to that. And when the internet connection is restored, any changes you've made between the connected devices via those third-party services are kept on the NAS, and when the internet comes back, it then re-establishes and resyncs all of that data, thereby lowering disruption immensely for businesses that are overly reliant on third-party cloud for a lot of their software and storage services, while maintaining them as well and integrating another layer of backup and retention to your setup there. It is a fantastic platform, and still in terms of software, Synology completely win the day with DSM there, and with more innovations coming out with support of write once, read many, and volume level encryption. I think right now DSM is better than it's ever been, and if you're looking for a 6-bay to have access to Synology DSM, this is probably the best option you've got right now at the end of 2022 and start of 2023. But for now, let's talk a little bit more about balance. Let's talk about value. You want value for money, don't you? And for that, we've got to talk about the Locker Station 6 Gen 2. Now, I mentioned this a lot in my other videos, but when it comes to the Locker Station series, they form a fantastic middle ground between a number of the other big brands out there. Prior to this point, I've talked about QNAP and Synology in quite a lot of detail, and one of the things I didn't really touch on throughout all of that is Synology and QNAP have kind of features to their individual platforms that you can't get on the other one. And a lot of people that seem to debate between these top two fighters go, well, I want some of that or I want some of that, without realizing that Acer Store lives there in the middle, one, arriving at a fantastic price point for the hardware that you're getting, but also giving you a number of features that are independent to both of those other brands. And in the case of the Locker Store 6 Gen 2, it's probably one of the best entries in that family. It's the first 6-bay to enter that. Gen 2 represents the 2022-2023 series, arriving midway through 2022. This device arrives, again, an integrated graphics CPU. It is that Intel N5105, that quad-core 2.0 to 2.9 gigahertz processor. On top of that, arriving with 8 gig of memory by default that can be upgraded to 16 gig. This system has everything you're going to need in terms of hardware. And although ADM isn't quite as highfalutin as DSM and QTS, I will say it has improved vastly with a number of great applications. Indeed, apparently there is an update coming out for ADM very, very soon, which will really mix things up with some new features too, but we'll talk about that more when that update arrives in beta or full. But some of the early things about the device that I liked immediately upon seeing it. So we've already talked a little bit about that CPU and memory, that standard stuff. Did you know this device has 4 M2 NVMe bays inside? That's right, this 6-bay could be turned into a 10-bay by adding up to 4 PCIe Gen 3 M2 NVMe's inside. They are bottlenecked. They're not the full, 3 times 4 that you might get from those, but you still get thousands of megs out of them. But because of the architecture of the CPU and the available lanes, they've got to be a little bit more efficient about it. So you can use those bays for traditional raw storage, or if you choose to, you can use them for caching, or indeed both, which is always going to be great to hear. 6 bays of storage supporting the latest SATA hard drive, so again 2022, 22 TB or 24 TB just around the corner. It also has LCD panel there on the front that can be used to give you real-time information about any kind of IP identification, temperatures, or if there's warnings and alerts, it can be notified to you. Indeed, if you're an installer and you're going to be doing multiple of these devices in different locations, you can set the device up from scratch just using the LCD panel. No client device. And if you've had the device in your home or business environment for a few years and you hear a beeping or alert, trust me, as useful as it will be to log in via your mobile app, then going into two-step authentication, making your way into the GUI to find out what the alert is, as useful as that is, and you might well do that anyway, finding out that the alert you're getting there is something on the LCD panel can actually change a lot of the reactive pattern you're going to have. And I think it's really weird that we don't see more LCDs on NASs, given they're hardly power hungry, are they? Now, in terms of connectivity, the device arrives, again, a lovely little KVM setup, those USB 3.2 Gen 2 ports there, so 10 gigabits per second, and the HDMI that it arrives with for the KVM, or if, you know, however you're going to use those USB ports, a KVM is utilising an HDMI 2.0B connection there, 2.0B, 4K 60 frames per second with improved shared bandwidth of HDR and SDR media there over HDMI 2.0A. The USB ports, alongside utilisation of standard USB drives up to 1000 megs each. On top of that, they can also be utilised for network adapters to add 2.5G and 5G there. So again, these are all officially supported, their own peripherals, as well as support of a wide myriad of third-party tools, hardware client tools. Indeed, if you do use the HDMI output for this, whether you're going to use the parallel GUI application known as Acer Store Portal to install a number of first or third-party applications, you can even run a VM from this device at the same time as Acer Store Portal and ADM on the device, and with that VM using VirtualBox, you can run them from the M2s inside, or individual apps if you choose, but run the VM from those and assign USB ports to the VM, therefore allowing you to have an HDMI outputted VM on this and run all of the NAS applications as well, all of which run from the system there in one, all built in together. Fantastic stuff. The surveillance application that this arrives with, it can be output as a KVM independent setup. It's not quite as good, I would argue, as QVR or DSM surveillance station, but it's still reasonably good. I think it will hopefully receive a few updates in that ADM update I mentioned earlier on. Talking of network connections earlier on, the system arrives with 2.5 GBE by default. So again, everything you've kind of heard me saying about the QNAP at the start of the video, most of that hardware is available here. And those two ports there, of course, can be lagged together. They can be used independently. And again, you can add more with the USB port there. Indeed, there's even an option to upgrade that thanks to that PCIe slot that currently has the M2 NVMe 4-port card inside. But along with removing that and replacing it with a 10G port, Acer Store are working on a combo card that has both 10GBE and M2 slots on board there to allow you to have the option of both that will be supported by this device. Now, when it comes to ADM, that software there, as mentioned, is not quite as highfalutin as QTS and DSM. The company just doesn't have that kind of money to throw at it, and when you're buying it, it's a far more nuanced balance point between the hardware and the software compared with that of QNAP or Synology. I will say the software is incredibly intuitive, it is user-friendly, it is very responsive, and I would also say it has little features, you know, like having support of BTRFS, like the Synology platform. It has all of those backup tools, it has all of those tools for cloud-based synchronization, not to the same degree, arguably, with like the bolt-on appearance of localized storage, and it doesn't have an AI, currently at least, an AI photo recognition tool on board, and a lot of its applications feel a little bit more rudimentary, at least in the case of multimedia, and the ones that are a step higher tend to err towards third-party tools, again, like VirtualBox, but still, you're getting a very robust software there. On top of that, you are getting hardware that is just near unbeatable for the value that you're getting, and therefore, the Logistore 6 Gen 2 is just the best value for money in terms of a 6-bay at the end of 2022 and 2023, and I do heartily recommend it, as I said in my video, in my review, and I say so now. But value isn't the only thing for a number of us, is it? Sometimes having the best value isn't the same as paying the lowest price. Some of us are looking for just the lowest possible price 6-bay that still gives us the best experience possible. And for that, of course, we got to make our way over to the TerraMaster and the T6423. Now, the T6423 unfortunately isn't here in the studio. I do have the 9-bay version, which is exactly the same, and we've gone into a lot of detail on. But for the purpose of this video, I'm going to have to keep that down there, and we're just going to put the graphic there on screen. So what is it about this NAS that makes it the best price, other than obviously the price tag? Well, I would argue this 6-bay, although again it's not the cheapest 6-bay in the market, for what you're getting for your money, moving slightly away from value and just in terms of the lowest possible entry point into 6-bay, while still having all the features and services we've talked about today, is probably the best option there for you. The TerraMaster T6 there again arrives with that integrated graphics CPU that we've talked about, the M5105. It also arrives with 8 gig of DDR4 memory that can be scaled up to 32 gig there. I believe after launch there is a 4 gig version out there, and TerraMaster do state that this system does support 32 gig of memory there, and again we'll be testing that very, very soon. On top of that, it also has 2.5 GBE by default, although it does have an HDMI. KVM is not really supported on this device. It's only really used for debug, or if you're going to be utilising the device for scaling up to TrueNAS. We'll get to that in just a moment. On top of that, it has USB 3.2 Gen 2, so 10 gigabits per second USB there. Why aren't we doing that, Synology? I don't know why. It also has 2 M2 NVMe slots inside, and again those slots can be used for caching and VMs. As I say, all the things we've talked about that we want NAS brands to give us, this has all of them. It just happens to do it at a lower price than everyone else. Indeed, if we move to the software side, not only does it support both ext4 and BTRFS, it also has its own fluid RAID system in T-RAID. That's right. Much like Synology's Synology Hybrid RAID that allows you to mix and match and use different drives, this 6-bay, whether you're going to use it in a RAID 5, RAID 6 or T-RAID, which by the way can have 1 or 2 disk redundancy, you can mix and match your drives in those fluid RAID configurations, which means if you get this 6-bay and on day 1 you put 4 or 5 drives inside, and then later on down the road add more drives, you can scale up and start to involve those larger capacities as you scale it up as well and expand it, and T-RAID has that functionality. Now, the software, TOS, arguably is probably, of all the software we've talked about today, probably the weakest of the 4. It's still a great platform and hugely evolved, and TOS 5 is better than it's ever been, with more first-party applications, its own surveillance application, and an AI photo recognition tool, as well as centralized backup and cloud synchronization tools as well. It still lacks a few of the killer applications and services of the likes of a Synology or QNAP. I hate seagulls. Now, it makes up for that in a few different ways. Number one, arriving in a very lean, fast, reactive form. Again, the system and its software doesn't have a lot of baggage to keep it down, so it's very straightforward. I would argue, again, those lack of AAA apps may annoy you down the line, but at the same time, it is still having all of those regular updates, and arguably it does have one feature that none of the other brands have that I've talked about, and that is isolation mode. I don't know why other brands don't include this. Maybe they do and I've just never found it, or they've integrated it recently. But the TerraMaster has a mode where if you go into the settings, you can enable isolation mode, and it immediately severs all remote internet connectivity on the device, and it disables any applications that have an unsupported or uncertified connection to, so only TerraMaster officially included apps are running, also disabling any services that have got PHP or remote access PHP. So that isolation mode allows you, if you're slightly concerned about remote access, to just bang, kill it all, and you can't enable it again without restarting the whole device. It is a fantastic remote access kill switch that I'm surprised isn't a lot more common. Now, another thing about the TerraMaster platform that I don't think TerraMaster would like me talking about, but I think it's important enough to a number of you that I should talk about it, is to do with TrueNAS. If you are buying a NAS system and you're buying it for the software included, fantastic, because it is a combined hardware software package when you buy these solutions. That's what they're all about. But a number of you have heard great things about TrueNAS. You've heard about that ZFS platform. You've heard about just how good it is. But what you don't like is the DIY element. You don't like the idea you've got to build a PC from scratch. In fact, you don't like the idea you've got to build a PC rather than a customized 24/7 built server that's designed to be more energy efficient and just longer lasting when it's on for days, weeks, months, or years. Now, with the TerraMaster platform, all of their Intel powered systems allow you to buy them as hardware, but change the software to TrueNAS. It's an incredibly straightforward process. I've done guides on it, and all you need in order to do it is literally just a USB stick. That's your lot. That's how straightforward it is. Now, I say TerraMaster do not officially support this, and I will say there's a very, very good chance that it would invalidate your warranty by doing this, or at least the support TerraMaster can give you, because you're using the system in a way that they didn't certify or guarantee. But at the same time, if you were already looking at TrueNAS anyway, and you were already looking at buying all the components to build this ZFS powerhouse TrueNAS, buying a TerraMaster NAS allows you to get all of the hardware you're going to need pre-built, built efficiently in a chassis designed for 24/7 with hardware that's designed to be efficient 24/7, but you can pop TrueNAS on it, have your triple parity RAID Z, have RAID resync, inline data duplication, inline data compression, all of the advantages of TrueNAS without having to get, silicon on your fingers when you're trying to install your CPU, trying to make sure it runs the first time when you nervously press the power button in the hope that the PC you built works first time. And although it's not one of the main reasons I would ever recommend a TerraMaster NAS, the main reason I would recommend is just it being a great price point, it's still, I would argue, a great reason to go for a TerraMaster NAS, whether you're buying it new to do it or using an old one down the line and you want to switch to TrueNAS. And I think TerraMaster could maybe stand to be a bit louder about that, or at least see the virtue in going down that road. And as a 6-bay NAS, it makes the T6 a tremendously great NAS to buy for those services. But this has been the 6-bay desktop NAS devices that I personally think are the best at the end of 2022 and going into 2023. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Maybe there's a NAS I didn't opt for in these videos. Maybe you do think the 1621 XS is a better choice. Maybe the TVS H674 was probably a better choice for you. Let me know in the comments. Other than that, thank you so much for watching. The full guide is linked in the description, which has got a lot more information about why I chose these NASes, links to the reviews and other articles on them. Of course, if you want to learn more, it helps if you subscribe either to here or to NAS Compares on the blog. Click like if you've enjoyed the video, because it really helps me know what I'm doing right and wrong. And of course, if you want to help us out here on the channel, and if this video has helped you, and if you were going to buy from Amazon anyway, use the links in the description. Anything you buy by taking that link, which doesn't cost you anything extra by the way, results in me and Eddie here at NAS Compares getting a kickback, because we're Amazon associates, and that money goes directly into what we do. It won't cost you any extra, and it helps us to continue doing what we do. But apart from that, if you need further support, use the free advice section over on NAS Compares. You can see it on the right hand side of the screen, but it's also linked in the description as well. Other than that, there is the free community forum where me, Eddie, who arguably does more work on it than I do, and other members of the NAS community that can answer your questions. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching, and have yourself a bloody great Christmas.